when I got here, I called Wyrot, introduced myself. We go out and have lunch, and I asked to have a sit down with John to introduce myself. So I go in, I say, my name's Brendan Quinn from Philly. He's like, all right, where'd you go to high school? First question, where'd you go to high school? He's not even from Philly. First question, where'd you go to high school? I say, St. Joe's Prep. He goes, oh, you see the eyes get wide. It's like, St. Joe's Prep. He's like, that's a Jesuit school, isn't it? I go, yes, it's a Jesuit school. I said, and I went to St. Joe's University. He goes, oh my God, all this Jesuit education. But now he starts rambling like my father was a track coach at St. Joe's. He was loving all that. And he starts giving me like a scouting report of the like parishes in Ann Arbor of like where the good homilies are and stuff like that. And I'm saying, I'm not a religious person, but I'm playing along with it. Right? I'm like, yeah, for sure. It's going to be great. Can't wait. I appreciate the scouting report. And I thought, I'm in. Everyone tells me this guy doesn't want to have a relationship with anybody. I'm made in the shade here. And of course, lo and behold, next time I see him, he just has no time for that. And when I ended up writing a big, long profile on him later that summer, originally declined to talk at all for it. And then I went and interviewed like 30 people, and I sent him a list of all the people that I interviewed with. And I said, now would you be willing to sit down? And he gave me 45 minutes. I probably needed like a 4-hour interview, and he gave me 45 minutes. Yeah.
Like, all right, Brendan, you wrap this up. 45 was good.
And I think like I talked to Kathleen too, and they were uneasy about that, which I never understood, because if you talk to Kathleen, she's like the nicest person. It was like totally fine interview. Like she would never say anything out of line. And it's like, why is this a big deal? But that's just kind of them, and it takes years to really kind of understand the intricacies of the family. And,
for sure.
They're relatable in a lot of ways. I got old Irish Catholic parents back home, right? You're private people and all that stuff. So, I got it after a while, but it was very interesting trying to kind of learn what makes that dude tick.
Yeah. How is that transitioning to covering Juwan? And he's part of the newer age and, been around the NBA and, the Fab Five, where everyone, like, he's just being looked at and dissected since the time he was 18. So is there a difference there where maybe he's more open? I've seen some quotes where, he keeps it pretty tight and pretty general, which you do, some basic questions after games, but how's that been compared with Beilein?
Yeah, he's definitely, there's no comparison there because they're just so ridiculously different, right? You had the one guy who started from a JV coach and climbed his way up to D1. And then you had the guy who was at 22 years old, one of the most famous athletes, in the USA. So, Juwan does not really have a level of interest in having kind of personal, I think, relationships with local media and stuff like that. And that's, I don't begrudge him for it. I totally get it. And, when in some of the stuff that I've done on his past, and wrote a large piece like on him being the first NBA guy to get $100 million contract. Right. And I wrote, another large piece about, where he grew up in Chicago. And you I came to kind of understand the picture of what we're dealing with as reporters when it comes to Juwan. Because, when he signed that $100 million contract, that ended up really framing kind of the way that he was treated and covered in a lot of ways throughout his pro career. It was anything he did, it was always, he got the first $100 million deal, right? So, he was easy to knock for that. So you go from being part of the Fab Five and the heat that the media attention kind of was put on that group, right, at Michigan. And then you go from that to being the first $100 million man, and you're playing in Washington, D.C., right? I think he got popped for whatever. He got in some trouble when he was like a young kid, right, in the league. And I think that brought a lot of negative media attention. And you start to just kind of understand, like, you spend 25 years around the NBA and you deal with media for the better part of 30 years plus of your life. Yeah, I'm not surprised the guy isn't here handing out his cell phone number and looking to, shoot the shit on a regular basis, or opening up his door for one-on-one interviews, or really being that interested in even doing press conferences and stuff like that. I get it. And, you know, sometimes I've talked to a couple people about this. Like, the interesting thing about some of these former, you know, superstars who have grown to the college level as coaches, so Juwan, Penny, Jerry Stackhouse, is like, they're so crazily famous, right? Like, these are guys who are, you know, they have been recognized in airports for decades, you know, that have LeBron's cell number, and like that they just exist in an entirely different world than even your most famous college coaches, right?
Yep.
Like Calipari or stuff like that. Like, let alone your run-of-the-mill Big Ten coach, right? Like, who cares about Mark Turgeon? If Mark Turgeon could walk through DTW and no one will know who he is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's just such a different world to live in, and like, that's Juwan. And once I understand that, then I'm not going to begrudge not having relationships like I can have with other coaches, because it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's funny how that it can be so great. I loved the guys that were part of the media Michigan writing team, and after the games, they were great. I tried to be as candid as I possibly could, even though our media training was to keep everything under wraps. But it's so like a snap of a finger, like the relationship can get sour real quick. And I don't know if that's changed at all. Like, have you experienced anything like that? Has that changed? Is it more difficult? If people don't want to be bothered during this pandemic, like, has this year changed? Like, how has that been in the last few years?
Well, first of all, this year sucks. This year's a total wash. You know, we're doing everything remotely and it's useless. And the biggest thing that's missing is relationships, and, you know, being able to talk to guys one-on-one, or being able to, you know, have repeat questions where, you know, if you're someone who's dealing with a certain player or anyone really, and, you know, you get a chance to actually ask follow-up questions and show this person that you care and you understand and you are genuinely curious and you're not trying to catch them saying anything or anything like that. That's how you develop real relationships, right? And that's how you put yourself in kind of a position for someone like you or whoever to want to explain something or want to tell your story or whatever it might be, right? So that's gone right now, which is terrible. Yeah. But to your question, like, yeah, I think it's worse than it has been in terms of people being so scared of saying something that becomes a tweet that ends up defining them or getting them in trouble, or and this goes from players right to coaches anymore. I feel like most of the coaches are so boring anymore. You know, there's just like, I came up at the very tail end of kind of the glory days of the Big East, when it was still, you know, Calhoun and Boeheim all in the same league, right? And you would go to media day and Calhoun would like talk shit on Boeheim, and then like the writers would go over to Boeheim and be like, Calhoun just said this. He'd be like, oh yeah. And then he would say something. Everyone go back to like, it's just a different world. You know, now everyone would just be sending tweets and just basically trying to burn it all down constantly, right? So everyone's worried about doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. That you know, there is a level of nuance when somebody says something, of being able to like present what they said without just putting it out there for people to interpret, or without context, or intentionally wanting it to go viral just because you want the attention, you know? And so that's kind of where we're at right now. And I mean, I feel really old talking this way.
Yeah.